Welcome back to the Adam Schefter Podcast, a special edition podcast now that the 2025 NFL schedule has been released. Fans can make their plans, teams can book their trips, everybody can officially begin to get ready for the 2025 season. And right before the draft, what we did was we did draft intel for all 32 teams. Worked out great. Think we're going to make it an annual tradition. And we decided to apply the same formula for this year's schedule release. Schedule release intel and information on all 32 teams here today. And to lead the way, in place of the expanded six-pack for the scheduling intel on all 32 teams, the co-host of the Pat McAfee Show, my friend, my colleague, Ty Schmit.
Thank you very much, Shefty. Hey, we talked about it the other day. Listen, I know everyone loves the social media aspect of it, and that is very cool. But schedule release day, finally having that schedule in your hands and knowing exactly how many primetime games, where you're slotted, with division games. It's one of the best days of the year for me in the NFL calendar. We got a lot of teams to get through, so let's just get right to it. Let's do the AFC North, and let's start with the Ravens.
All right, Ty, here's what we got for the Baltimore Ravens, and I've got a list of notes here. I was taking notes here as the ESPN schedule release show was on Wednesday night. But here's what stands out about the Baltimore Ravens schedule. They play 2 road games in the first 7 weeks of the season. They play at the Buffalo Bills in week 1, Sunday Night Football, and at the Kansas City Chiefs in week 4. So we're going to get an idea right away about the Baltimore Ravens and how they stack up against the 2 teams that they really have to take down if they're going to have any hope of winning the AFC North, the AFC Conference, whatever it may be. At Buffalo, week 1, at Kansas City, week 4. We remember they played the Chiefs last year, opening night, lost 27-20 in Kansas City when Isaiah Likely couldn't get his foot down. His foot was about an inch too big. Otherwise, they could have won that game in Kansas City. But the Baltimore Ravens are going to be tested early on with 2 of the most attractive games on the schedule. They come at us fast, they come at us furious, and we'll get an idea right away about how the Ravens fare on the road early in the season.
Yeah, I agree. Tough couple games to start. One thing that they have in their schedule that I'm sure as we go through this, a lot of teams do that. I know they've started to do this that I don't love as much. They have 1 division game week 2 against Cleveland, and then they have that kind of cluster, five games in like a 6-week span where it's all division games. And I don't think that's till about week 11. So, it'll be a while. It might be another one of the things like we had last year where the AFC North is kind of coming down to week 17 or week 18 until we figure out who's going to win the division. But it kind of that is what it is, I think, with a lot of teams anymore. All right, Shefty, let's move on to the Cincinatti Bengals.
Well, Ty, what has stood out to me about the Bengals in recent years, nobody has started the season slower than the Cincinnati Bengals in recent years. Whatever it is, they cannot win the opener. They don't start quickly. Remember last year, everybody in America had the Bengals in their survival pool at home against the New England Patriots, and the Patriots come out and upset the Bengals in Cincinnati in week 1. And the Patriots were one of the worst teams in football the rest of the year, but they managed to go into Cincinnati. So this year is an opportunity for the Bengals to start quick, if they can. Now, I would have thought the same thing last year at home against New England, so stop me when you heard this before, but check this out early on. At Cleveland against who knows who's playing quarterback for the Cleveland Browns in week 1, maybe Joe Flacco. Home for the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 2. At Minnesota and an inexperienced J.J. McCarthy in week 3. And then at Denver in week 4. So 3 of the first 4 on the road, but nothing that you look at and you say, this is terrible. Like, there's no reason that they shouldn't come out of this at worst 2-2, maybe 3-1, and they're done with 3 of their 4 road games early on. A real opportunity there for Cincinnati to get out to a much better start than the Bengals have had in recent years.
Yeah, I agree. And, you look at kind of the rest of their schedule, if they can avoid that slow start and get a couple of those division games. Again, we don't know how any of these teams are going to be, but their schedule looks fairly favorable. So if they don't start 0-4 again and kind of have to put the pedal to the metal for the rest of the season, I would assume that this year, barring no injuries or anything like that, you look at the Bengals and you think, okay, that should be a playoff team. So I agree. Have to start fast, obviously, because after that week 4, it gets a little bit more difficult there with, the Lions and then at Green Bay and so on and so forth. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Let's move to the Cleveland Browns, Schefty. A lot of intrigue there, obviously.
Well, I look at this and they have 0 primetime games. The Browns are one of, I believe, 3 teams, and we'll touch on the others in this podcast, that are not scheduled for primetime. Not only are the Browns not scheduled for primetime, but they are scheduled to play in the Eastern time zone in 14 of their 17 games. So that means they're probably in the 1 o'clock window for the majority, if not all of them. Their only 3 games outside of the Eastern time zone are in London, Chicago, and Las Vegas. Other than that, they are basically the 1 o'clock team, not in prime time, in the Eastern time zone. Essentially, the NFL is saying right now, probably rightfully so, we don't believe much in the Cleveland Browns, and it's up to Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders to prove otherwise.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at their schedule, and again, we don't know. There's a chance that Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel is the starter. I mean, that's possible. I don't think it's a guarantee that Joe Flacco, or Kenny Pickett is going to get the job. But you look through here and you try to figure out, okay, if it is Flacco or if it is Pickett, and let's say they start, 1-7 or 1-8 or whatever the case may be, and they do have to make a move. When would they make a move to either Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders? Week 9 bye. So maybe you do it then, but if you're staring at 0-8, I don't know. It's very interesting because they don't exactly have a cupcake schedule either. Obviously, you're playing in the AFC North, so that's always going to be difficult. But we'll see. This could be a hell of a year for the Browns. Let's move on to the final team in the AFC North, Shefty. What do you think about the Steelers' schedule?
Well, Ty, everybody's waiting to hear from Aaron Rodgers, and I believe the Steelers have a mandatory minicamp June 10th to the 12th. And I would think that if Aaron Rodgers is going to commit to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I don't know why he wouldn't, that we would get word from him some point in early June before or right at the start of that mandatory minicamp. And if he does come back for that mandatory minicamp, this schedule is tailor-made for Aaron Rodgers because it starts out week 1. They play the New York Jets. So Aaron Rodgers would get to go right up against his former team right away. And then from there, he would have week 2 against Seattle, a team that he's played and had a lot of battles with. Week 4, Minnesota, the team that he could not land a job with, as much as he may or may not have tried to do that. Week 8, the Green Bay Packers. Ooh, wouldn't that be interesting? Aaron Rodgers playing for the Steelers in week 8 against the Packers. Week 12, the team he owns at Chicago against the Bears. And week 16 at the Lions, another team he's battled. So Aaron Rodgers, if he plays, gets a chance to go up against the Jets, Seahawks, Vikings, Packers, Bears, and Lions. What are we waiting for? Go get the deal done, get into Steelers camp, and get ready for the June mandatory minicamp and a schedule that is tailor-made for him.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's not the case at all, but obviously the narrative after their schedule release was, wow, this is tailor-made for Aaron Rodgers. It's almost like they're trying to bait him in to kind of ending this and signing. We'll see if that happens. I also thought it was interesting how some people on the NFL Live crew, I know Dan Orlovsky said yesterday, he's looking at the Steelers and he sees them potentially staring down 0-6. I would assume maybe that's with or without Rodgers. I don't know. There's still so much up in the air with Pittsburgh, but I think you're right. that's kind of the fun story. The easy way to do it is, oh, wow, they made this schedule with Aaron Rodgers as their starting quarterback in mind. And I don't think that's that crazy. All right, Shefty, let's move to the AFC East and start with the Miami Dolphins.
We go to the Miami Dolphins, Ty, and as I looked at my notes, 6 of the first 8 games are against teams that didn't make the playoffs last year. So there's an opportunity for Miami to make some noise in a season that they have to win. The other thing is the league obviously feels pretty good about the Dolphins because they scheduled them in prime time 5 times. So the league is telling us we like the Miami Dolphins. And the Dolphins get to play the first game in Spain against the Washington Commanders. So it's kind of an interesting schedule for a team that, no disrespect, I don't know that a lot of people outside of Miami are excited about the Dolphins, but the league seems to be right now.
Let's move on to the reigning AFC East champion Buffalo Bills.
I think this is all about Week 9, hosting the Kansas City Chiefs, the team that they lost against in the AFC Championship game 32-29. This year in the regular season, they get the Chiefs in Buffalo. And we have seen before that the Bills can beat the Chiefs in the regular season, but they've been unable to slay the dragon in the postseason. So even though Week 9 is going to come with all these bells and whistles and everyone's going to be excited about that game, and we will be, the truth of the matter is we have to wait to see if the Buffalo Bills can do what they need to do, what they're supposed to do in the postseason. That's where it matters for the Buffalo Bills in what should be a division that's very winnable for Buffalo. Again, you look at the rest of the Bills' schedule, host the Ravens in the opening Sunday night game of the year. Play at the Jets the next week. Should win that game, right? You agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. Home for Miami. Home for New Orleans. Home for New England. So literally they're home 4 of the first 5 weeks of the season. There's a chance for the Bills to get out to a real quick start here and really try to make some noise in the AFC.
Yeah, and, for me, just looking at, I'm hoping that by the time Week 17 rolls around, the Bills don't have a, 4-game advantage in the division because the Eagles are coming to Buffalo, and that is potentially a Super Bowl preview. Now, obviously, Week 17, you get that late in the season, you might have a couple guys sitting out, but it would be nice if both those teams potentially, have something to play for still.
I think that's an advantage to getting the Eagles in Week 17 because who knows if you or they will be playing for something, right? Early on, we know that both those teams are in play. Week 17, who knows? Buffalo could have the division wrapped up. Advantage Eagles. The Eagles could have a playoff spot wrapped up. Advantage Buffalo. There's a couple of ways to look at getting a great team late in the year. That might be an advantage for both those teams.
Without a doubt. And I guess for Buffalo, with them, it's always going to be, hey, now granted, they lost, the Chiefs went, to Buffalo and won in the playoffs a couple years ago, but they want home field advantage. They don't want to have to go on the road and go through Kansas City or something like that. So that'll be something to keep an eye out for the entire season there. All right, let's move on to the new regime, the Mike Vrabel-led New England Patriots.
Well, I think the first thing you look at with the New England Patriots this year, to me, without question, Week 7 at Tennessee. Mike Vrabel gets to go back to play the team that fired him. And I can't imagine he was particularly happy about it. And I'm sure, Mike Vrabel is experienced enough and savvy enough to be saying all the right things about that matchup. But the truth is, that's going to be personal. That's going to be personal for Mike Vrabel in Week 7 when he takes the Patriots to Tennessee to play. And you look at that, again, to me, that's going to be something that really matters to him. As for the rest of the schedule, home opener against the Raiders at Miami, a winnable game, although it's tough to play in Miami early in the season, that sun and the heat. Home for Pittsburgh, home for Carolina. I'm going to make a prediction to you right now. The Patriots are going to win more games this year than people realize. They're going to be a better team this year than people realize. Had a strong draft, loaded up, and Mike Vrabel, he knows how to get his team ready and compete, and that's why they made the move. And I believe the Patriots will be one of the surprise teams this year.
I agree. I mean, I think you just look at what Drake May did last year. Like, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to say that they could maybe be a wild card team.
I agree.
You know,
I agree.
Yeah.
By the way, they are to me what the Commanders were last year. I know Jaden Daniels was stepping in, but the Commanders gave the Eagles a run, and I could see the Patriots doing the same with the Buffalo Bills this year.
Right. I mean, I was talking with Connor from, Pat's show, and obviously he's a diehard Patriots fan. So, you take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but he's been very, kind of level-headed about what's happened in New England. He was looking at that schedule. He was like, you know what? Like, we could be 5-2 through 7 weeks, and I don't think anyone would have anticipated that would happen. We saw how good Drake May was last year. And your point about Vrabel, he is going to get the most out of everyone on that team. Like, good, bad, or indifferent. The guys will reach their potential, and some guys will play above their potential because of how good of a coach he is. So I agree, Shefty. I think there's a chance they're a wild card team this year. Okay, let's wrap up the AFC East and move on to another new regime in the New York Jets.
Well, the first game of the season is against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So when we look at the New York Jets, what better opportunity for Justin Fields in week 1 than to go up against the team that at one point benched him last season for Russell Wilson? Now, Pittsburgh wanted him back at one point after they tried to trade for Matthew Stafford and then went to Justin Fields to re-sign him. But at that point, I think he had mentally moved on, got the deal from the New York Jets, a team that paid him. And now Justin Fields does not have to wait long before he gets a chance to go up against his former team. It could be Justin Fields versus Aaron Rodgers, Justin Fields versus his former team, Aaron Rodgers versus his former team. The NFL certainly knows how to schedule those games. And the Jets are amazing because last year with Aaron Rodgers, 6 primetime games. This year, 2 primetime games. So the league is telling us, don't believe that much in the Jets. Understandably right now, we'll see how it goes with the new first-year head coach in Aaron Glenn, new GM Darren Muji, and essentially a new remade roster.
Yeah, the Jets are kind of a big question mark for me. I have no idea what to expect there. Really, all we've talked about with them has kind of been the Aaron Rodgers saga. And obviously, you get a new coach and a new GM, that's going to be mentioned. But Justin Fields, I feel like the book's still out on him. He could reach his potential, and he could be one of those guys who, out of nowhere, through week 8 or week 9, we're talking, hey, could this guy be, an MVP candidate? We know what he can do with his legs. But I really, it wouldn't surprise me if they were better than people thought this year, and it wouldn't surprise me if they win 4 games and go 4-13. So it's kind of, I guess that's a typical Jets season, I suppose. All right, Shefty, let's move on to the AFC South. What do you think about the Houston Texans schedule?
When I look at the Texans, Ty, the thing that stands out, first of all, and I don't think a lot of people think of it this way, they're going for their 3rd straight AFC South title. Do we think of the Houston Texans, a team that was in the dumper the way they were, in a position where they could win their 3rd straight division title? The other thing that stands out to me, week 5, they play the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. Right now, this team is 0-3 versus the Ravens. D'Amico Ryans, Nick Caserio, they have not been able to get past this Baltimore team. The Ravens have been a thorn in their side, and they can win the division again. They're probably set up to win the division again, but they're going to have to find a way to beat Baltimore, which they've been unable to do in the playoffs and in the regular season.
Yeah, and I think with the exception of maybe week 17 at the Chargers, they have a couple tough games, but their schedule kind of sets up for them to finish strong going into the playoffs. Obviously, last year they kind of limped in, and everyone was a little sour on them by the time the playoffs got there. We'll see. We don't know what some of these other teams are going to be, but I think it sets up a little better this year than it did last year. Let's move on to the Indianapolis Colts.
November's a tough month for your Colts there, Ty. We've got a tough month where they play at Pittsburgh in November, then Atlanta in Berlin, which is not an easy game, a bye at Kansas City, and home versus the Houston Texans. So that's a really difficult, challenging month of November for the Indianapolis Colts. And by that point in time, my guess would be Daniel Jones is going to be playing quarterback if he's healthy in November. So it's going to be up to Daniel Jones to find a way to try to take down the Steelers in Pittsburgh, the Falcons in Berlin, at Kansas City, and the Houston Texans.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think there's a chance Daniel Jones starts week 1. But then I'm also just looking at week 15 at Seattle, week 16, San Francisco at home, then Jacksonville at home, and then you finish at Houston. Again, the Colts are one of those teams where, yeah, schedule is one thing, but they still don't know who their quarterback's going to be. So until that gets figured out, I'm sure they're not putting too much stock into where they're playing and who they're playing when. Let's move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Well, Ty, when we're talking about the Jaguars, we're talking about the London Jaguars or the Jacksonville London team, whatever you want to call it, because this is going to be the 12th straight year that they've played in London. They've played there every year since 2013. This year they'll play the Rams, and they know the Rams very well, considering that the Jaguars' new head coach, Liam Cohen, was an offensive coordinator under Sean McVay, and the Jaguars' general manager, James Gladstone, worked under the Rams' general manager, Les Snead, until the Jaguars hired him. And so, to me, it's about going back to London again. It's also opening against the Carolina Panthers, where we'll finally get a chance to see the number 2 overall pick, Travis Hunter, play wide receiver, probably some defensive back. He'll be all over the Carolina Panthers and Xavier Legette. He'll be matched up against J.C. Horn. A lot of different matchups for Travis Hunter to think about. But Jacksonville going back to London, once again, a storyline on their schedule.
Yeah, and I'm looking at week 2 for, Travis Hunter, if he's going to be playing cornerback. That's a nice little, hey, welcome to the league, kid. They go to Cincinnati. Who do you want, Jamar Chase or T. Higgins? So we'll see what he does week 1. I hope the Jags are better this year. I really do. I hope that, they can at least, because like we mentioned, the AFC South's kind of, obviously the Texans are the cream of the crop right now, but I think you could make a case maybe outside of the Titans that any of those teams could win the division. So I'd like to see them kind of, take a step. Speaking of the Titans, let's go ahead and finish the AFC South with them. What stands out about their schedule?
Well,
Shefty?
Tough early start for Cam Ward, the number 1 overall pick. Like, could there be a more difficult week 1 matchup than in Denver against the Broncos team that went out and added Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga to their defense to go along with Shade Barron, their first-round draft pick, their cornerback from Tech. Cam Ward is stepping into it in week 1. That is going to be, I think, a brutal matchup for he could not ask for a more difficult way to start the season. And by the way, then they open the season at home against the Rams, a home opener. That's a tough matchup before they play the Colts at home and then travel to Houston against DeMeco Ryans. Like, he's going to have some really tough early season matchups. And Cam Ward may be a great NFL quarterback, but he's going to be tested early, Ty.
All right, let's move on to the AFC West. Shefty, what do you think about the Broncos schedule?
Ty, when we look at the Broncos schedule, I think the first thing you think of is the Christmas Day matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. There's a chance, I know people might not think this right now, there's a chance that game is going to be deciding the AFC West. I think Denver's going to be very good this year. Very good with Bo Nix. And you play in Kansas City in December, Christmas Day. That has been a place, if you look at the Broncos' record in Kansas City late in the season, it is abominable. Okay, their record against the Chiefs in recent years, terrible. They finally broke through last year. They should have won in Kansas City when they botched a field goal at the end of the game that cost them the game. And now they're going to go back to Kansas City. But early on, also, I think a chance for this team to have a decent start. Cam Ward at home, like we just mentioned, in week 1, at Indy week 2, at the Chargers week 3, 2 tough road matchups before coming back home to play Joe Burrow. So, a little bit of a challenging start. The Chiefs in Kansas City, Christmas Day, that to me becomes the centerpiece of the Denver Broncos schedule.
Yeah, without a doubt, I think they're going to be much better too. And I'm just looking at two of the games here post bye week. They go to Washington on November 30th. I think that's a game last year. If people saw the schedule, that's kind of like a stinker. Like maybe let's hide that on 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and no one's going to watch it. That's a Sunday night football game this year, rightfully so. And then December 14th, Green Bay goes to Denver. So a couple tough non-divisional games there that I think will be, appointment viewing for a lot of people. Let's move on to the Chiefs. Chiefs obviously riddled with, primetime games.
Oh, it is unbelievable to me. Okay. This is incredible. 8 standalone games, 7 primetime games, opening Friday night in Brazil against the Chargers, Thanksgiving Day in Dallas against the Cowboys, Christmas Day in Kansas City against the Broncos. Do they play on Veterans Day, President's Day, Hanukkah? They got to be playing on every holiday, whatever they're playing, right? And if you were sick of Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes and Taylor Swift last year, get ready for this year, because it is going to be Chiefs overload this year with the Chiefs on primetime every week. It's incredible how much they are featuring and leaning into this franchise.
Yeah, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility or even crazy to say that they might have 3 of the top 5 most watched regular season games ever this year. I think that opening game in Brazil that's exclusively on YouTube, that could do bigger numbers than the Super Bowl just for availability in terms of where YouTube could position it and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that might be a bit of a stretch, but that's going to be crazy. You mentioned Dallas on Thanksgiving. I mean, that's, thank God we're not getting just Dallas Giants again. So I think there's a chance that they have 3 of the 5 most watched games ever in the regular season this year.
And it just underscores how important Patrick Mahomes is to the National Football League, because literally they're getting value out of him at every step of the way. We're going to put him on YouTube early. We're going to put him on CBS on Thanksgiving Day. We're going to put him on Netflix on Christmas Day. We're going to put him on Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football. He is all over the map. They're milking Patrick Mahomes for whatever he's worth, and whatever the Chiefs are paying him isn't enough, and the league should have to chip in a stipend for all the ways that the league is benefiting.
I agree. That's good business. Let's move on to the Pete Carroll and Tom Brady, led Las Vegas Raiders.
Well, the fun gets started right away, right? Because the first week of the season for the Raiders and their limited owner, Tom Brady, is at New England. So I want to see Mark Davis next to Tom Brady, or do the Crafts save Tom Brady a seat in their box next to him and host him the first week of the season when the Raiders are playing in New England, and they've already retired Tom's number and honored him and all those things like that. So Brady back in New England as Pete Carroll gets started with Ashton Genty against a tough Mike Vrabel defense. It's actually a sneaky, intriguing game to me, because I think the Patriots are going to be better. I think the Raiders are going to be better. We got Brady's first game as a limited owner. So to me, I kind of like that week 1 matchup for the Las Vegas Raiders. Thank you, NFL schedule makers.
Yeah, I do too. I think that could sneaky be one of the best games of week 1. And like you said, the story kind of writes itself. I mean, the NFL obviously saw what was happening with that. So kudos to that. Excited to see what the Raiders are this year. I think there's a lot more hope and optimism around them than there has been for the last several years. So that should be fun. All right, let's wrap up the AFC West and move on to the LA Chargers.
Well, what stands out right here is that Jim Harbaugh better have some movies downloaded and some opponents downloaded, because the Chargers right now are scheduled to fly 37,086 miles this season, the most in the NFL. By the way, we brought up the Bengals before. We talked about their schedule, Cincinnati. The Bengals fly 8,753 miles this season. That's nothing compared to the Chargers, who could fly around the equator and back and then have leftover mileage to spare. 37,000+ miles. That has to take some kind of toll. I don't care what it is. You can't be on the plane that much, including the first game of the season in Brazil against the Chiefs, free on YouTube. We get things started right away. They're going to start logging the miles early on for the Chargers, and they're going to continue logging miles throughout the course of the entire season.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's going to be absolutely massive. And then I'm just looking at week 14. They have Monday Night Football at SoFi against the Eagles. I think one of the knocks, at least early last year on the Chargers, was, hey, they beat the hell out of the bad teams, and then they just can't beat the good teams. I think they kind of put that to rest a little bit. But, at that point in the season, obviously we know how tough the AFC West is. That's kind of a tough game in there where they're probably going to be jockeying for a playoff spot. So I'm very excited to watch that one as well. All right, Shefty, that finishes the AFC. Let's now move on to the NFC. We'll start with the NFC North and the Chicago Bears.
Well, how about the Chicago Bears hosting the first Monday Night Football game of the year against J.J. McCarthy and the Minnesota Vikings? A great matchup. Really like the matchup week one. And they're going to be home early on, Chicago is, for that Minnesota game right away. They have Dallas at home in week 3. But they are not going to be home very much after that, the Chicago Bears. They have only 3 home games from weeks 4 through week 14. So from weeks 4 through week 14, the Chicago Bears are hitting the road. They won't be home very much at all, but they do start early on at home, that Monday night game, and there's going to be a lot of anticipation for Ben Johnson and what these new Bears can do in Chicago.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people will, obviously talking about that. Then there's Ben Johnson's return to Detroit, which will be a big thing, going back to Washington after the Hail Mary last year.
Yeah.
But also me just looking at it, that week 5 bye week, man, that is just, for a team that's expecting to kind of make a run this year, that is a lot of football to play without a break, especially when they're going on the road and they're not going to be home tough. So it'll be quite the test for the Bears in this first year with Ben Johnson. Speaking of Ben Johnson, let's move on to the team he was calling the plays for last year and the Detroit Lions.
I think it's a tough start of the season for the Lions. Like let's take into consideration the fact that the Lions are without both their coordinators from the last few years. Ben Johnson goes to Chicago as head coach. Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, goes to New York. And now, as you're trying to replace those coordinators, 2 of your first 3 games of the season are at Green Bay and at Baltimore. That's a tough sandwich in between, by the way, by a home game against Ben Johnson. So it's a tough start of the year for the Lions. Also, Lions, Thanksgiving and Christmas Day games as well. Thanksgiving against the Packers. And they play on Christmas Day, I believe, against the Vikings, if my memory serves me correctly off the top of my head.
Yep.
And the Lions, when you look at it on paper, they might have the toughest schedule in the National Football League. Now, it's hard to say how the season's going to go down, but it is a very challenging schedule. It's challenging early. It's challenging late. They're without their coordinators. And who's the last really good team that we can remember losing both coordinators? That would have been the Philadelphia Eagles after they lost the Super Bowl to the Kansas City Chiefs. They lost Shane Steichen, their offensive coordinator, to the Colts. They lost Jonathan Gannon, their defense coordinator, to the Cardinals. And the next year, the Eagles started fast and fell off furiously. They were not the same team. So I think there's a period of adjustment in addition to a tough schedule. And the Lions had such a magical run last year. I'm not saying they can't do it again. I want to see them do it again, but it's going to be challenging.
Okay, let's move on to the Green Bay Packers, Shefty.
Again, Lions week 1 at home. Commanders week 2 at home. So early on, we're going to see a lot and learn a lot about the Green Bay Packers, who we're really not talking about all that much. If the Packers somehow come out and start 2-0, that's where you want to be. And if not, they've lost against 2 of the better teams in the NFC. And then, of course, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles in the tush-push game where the Packers proposed banning the play, and we'll learn in a couple of weeks if it does or doesn't happen. My guess is the tush-push is gone, and that'll be the Philadelphia Eagles' chance for revenge in Green Bay to show that they don't need the tush-push to try to beat the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, and for the Packers, this is the first year in the Matt LaFleur era where they start the season out at home. So I thought that was pretty interesting. They've been going on the road a lot. And then they also, tough schedule, like the Bears, they have that week 5 bye. But when you look at all their really tough games, Commanders week 2 at home, The Eagles, week 10 at home. The Ravens, week 17 at home. So they kind of got a little bit of a gift there. All those primetime games will be at home. So we'll see. I think you're right on, you hit the nail on the head with the Packers. The first couple weeks of the season will be very telling as to what kind of team they're going to be this year. All right, let's wrap up the NFC North, Schefty, and look at the Minnesota Vikings schedule.
Here's what's interesting about the Vikings schedule, Ty. It's a lot of home games, but not the way that you would think. After opening the season in Chicago on Monday Night Football, they are scheduled to have 4 straight home games, but 2 of those 4 will not be at home. They will be on the road week 4 in Dublin against the Steelers, a home game in Dublin, and week 5, a home game in London against the Browns. So they are going to be going from Dublin to London, jet setting across Europe, hopping all around, globe trending, and whatever the heck you call that kind of thing. But they're going to be gone from Minnesota for a long period of time in that weird 4-game homestand that's really not a 4-game homestand before they come home and have a bye before they get ready for another home game against the Philadelphia Eagle. It's kind of a wacky schedule as they get ready for J.J. McCarthy to step in, and we'll see how effective he is early on. But that is a very strange schedule with back-to-back overseas games before they come home for a bye and another home game against the Eagles.
Yeah, and it looks like the NFL is almost using them as like a guinea pig or a test subject for if they want to add more of these international games, and there's a chance that teams are going to be overseas for multiple weeks. Now, I think it's only an hour and 20, hour and a half flight from Ireland to London, so it's not the end of the world, but still, that's a long time to be out of your routine, be away from, your family, all that kind of stuff. And it is kind of interesting that they use the Vikings because after last year, they almost win the division. I think a lot of people are high on them, but again, maybe the book is still out on JJ McCarthy. So we'll see. But that is just a peculiar schedule. So we'll see how that shakes out. All right, Shefty, let's move on to the NFC East and the Washington Commanders.
All right, what stands out to me about the Commanders is if they're going to take the jump in the NFC East, they're going to have to do it against the Philadelphia Eagles. But when you look at the Washington Commanders schedule, they do not play the Philadelphia Eagles until week 16. Week 16 is the first time the Commanders play the Eagles. They then host a game against the Dallas Cowboys before finishing at Philadelphia. So again, we're back to that situation where does one team have something to play for? Do both teams have something to play for? Is that last game of the year at Philadelphia going to matter? But they could not get past the Eagles last year to win the division or to beat them in the conference championship game to get to the Super Bowl. And now they're not going to see the Eagles until week 16, but then see them 2 times in 3 weeks to close out the 2025 regular season schedule.
Yeah, interesting. And they're, again, another one of those teams where their final 4 games are divisional games. So, again, the NFC East could kind of be up in the air, and we won't get much clarity until then. I'm also looking at the week 10 NFC divisional round rematch against the Lions at home. I think that could be arguably, we could be talking game of the regular season, game of the year for that one. So excited for that as well. Let's move on to the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. What do you think about their schedules, Shefty?
Todd, they don't play 2 straight games at home all season long. So they're back and forth all year long. 2 of the last 3 against Washington. First time since 2000 that they played Dallas in the opener. As we mentioned in the podcast this past week, it's the first time they played Dallas Monday night game to open the season since the last year at Franklin Field before they moved to the stadiums to, the Veterans Stadium at that point in time. Mm-hmm. So it's not common for Philadelphia to open against Dallas. It's going to do it this year. Don't play 2 straight at home. And the Eagles schedule, very difficult, very challenging. The defending Super Bowl champions will be tested.
Yeah, and I think, the first thing that sticks out to me is just I know, Cowboys are going to be on Thanksgiving every year, as are the Lions. The Chiefs kind of already have almost seems like a handshake agreement with the league. Hey, we want to be on Christmas this year. With how good the Eagles are and how marketable they are and how many stars they have, I'm surprised that they're not either on Thanksgiving or Christmas this year. But again, they have, plenty of primetime games. So I guess it's kind of, that's a wash there. I don't know if people really care about that. Okay, let's move on to the New York Giants. Big season for the New York Giants. What do you think of their schedule?
We mentioned the tough schedule for the Detroit Lions. The only team that may have a tougher schedule is the New York Giants. It is a brutal schedule in a year where people are fighting to keep their jobs. The Giants open up at Washington. Tough matchup, right?
Yeah.
Next week at Dallas. Tough matchup, right?
Yep.
Home opener the next week in week 3 against the Chiefs. Like, that is just brutal the way that starts before a home game against the Chargers. Then they get something of a breather at New Orleans. Okay. Before coming home for Philadelphia, at Denver, at Philadelphia, the 49. It goes on and on. It goes on and on. That is a very tough schedule that the New York Giants have. They had the toughest strength of schedule going in. Now, again, teams suffer injuries. Teams aren't as good. We don't know. But today, as we tape this, the New York Giants have the single toughest strength of schedule in the National Football League.
Yeah, I mean, this is a murderer's row. This is borderline ridiculous that the NFL did this to the Giants. And I guess if you're a Giants fan too, when you just look at this schedule, like, it makes sense why they went out and got Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. Like, I don't think you want to throw Jackson Dart out there week 1 and, hey, kid, figure it out. If they don't get that week 5 game at New Orleans, like, there's a world in which they're – I mean, you don't want to say that they're not going to win a game, but there's a world where they're 0-12.
They'll win a game. They'll win a game, but the schedule is very difficult.
It's crazy. So, I mean, a lot of promise and hope for Giants fans this year. So we'll see. Anything can happen. Let's move on to the Cowboys and close out the NFC East.
Well, first of all, let me say this about the Dallas Cowboys. We've never seen this happen before, but they play 4 games this week on Thursdays. 4. Week 1 against the Philadelphia Eagles. Week 3, week 14 against Detroit. Week 17 against Washington. The Cowboys are not only America's team, they are Thursday's team this year. But the other thing is the NFL must be really determined to try to break up families this year, because the schedule it's set on Thanksgiving is the best Thanksgiving schedule that we've seen in recent memory. We've got the Packers and the Lions. We've got the Chiefs and the Cowboys. We've got the Bengals and the Ravens. So again, Thanksgiving, I know people are going to be gathered around the table. I'll be gathered around my TV watching those games. And by the way, Christmas is also really appealing. So the NFL, I know that they fashion themselves as a family sport. I think they're family wreckers this year with all the games that they scheduled on all these holidays. And the Cowboys obviously have the most enticing, appetizing Thanksgiving Day matchup that we can remember in recent memory against the team that's playing on every single national holiday and every single day of the week, the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, I think people get upset about it year after year, but it is what it is. I mean, you're living in La La Land if you don't think the Cowboys are going to be loaded up with primetime games every year. And at the very least, I mean, like you said, the Thanksgiving Day game is incredible. The Christmas Day game is incredible. And I think there's a lot of excitement around the Cowboys this year. Obviously, getting George Pickens doesn't hurt that. So we'll see. I mean, if you don't like watching the Cowboys on primetime, unfortunately, you're just going to have to get used to it because that's going to be the way it goes. All right, Shefty, let's move on to the NFC South and the Tampa Bay Bucks.
Tampa, opening the season, road trip at Atlanta, at Houston, before coming home for a home opener against the New York Jets and then the Philadelphia Eagles. So that's how you start the season. 4 prime time games. But I think the way that they finished the season in Tampa also is a little notable. They play, again, the division down the stretch, with the exception of one game. Play New Orleans at home, Atlanta at home, at Carolina, at Miami, Carolina home. So basically, 3 home division games in the final 5 weeks of the season. 3. And we don't think the Saints are going to be able to challenge the Bucs. And the Panthers, they might be able to play with them, but you don't see the Panthers taking down the Bucs this year. So really, it would seem to come down to the Falcons and the Bucs. And again, the Buccaneers have a nice scheduling format for the division home games late in the season.
Yeah, it could just be because that division is not great, but you look at it and you anticipate that the Bucs should be able to take care of business and win that division again. But again, like you said, the Falcons will probably give them a run for their money, so we'll keep an eye on that. You just mentioned them. I don't think anyone expects much out of them this year. What about the New Orleans Saints schedule?
0 primetime games. The league is telling you everything that it thinks about the New Orleans Saints. When you have Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler, and Jake Haener competing for the starting quarterback job, you get 0 primetime games. And that's the situation that the Saints are in. They get a chance to see if Tyler Shuck can be the guy. If he can, great. They found a quarterback for the future. If not, when the draft is in Pittsburgh in 2026, New Orleans would figure to be square in the mix to draft a quarterback again. But the league right now does not believe in the New Orleans Saints.
Well said. Let's move on to the Carolina Panthers.
Carolina, who, by the way, I think will be a little bit better than people think. 3 of their first 4 games on the road: at Jacksonville, at Arizona, home for Atlanta, at New England. I think those are sneaky, tough games. Now, you got to play them at some point in time, and that's the way it goes. But I don't think that schedule is as simple as people think. Like at Jacksonville, for the first game that Liam Cohn's coaching against, you don't know what you're going to be getting. At Arizona, I kind of like Arizona, especially early in the year. And at New England, I told you they're going to be tough. So kind of a tough early start for Carolina, which has a week 14 bye, a late bye late in the season. Now, there's never a bad time for a bye, Ty, but 14, a little late in the year.
Yeah, and I think I agree. I'm on Carolina, or I'm a little higher on Carolina this year, just from what we saw with Bryce Young last year. So, yeah, I mean, not the easiest schedule in the world, but I hope they could just keep it together enough where we're not talking about, okay, Bryce Young's done, they need to look for a new quarterback, and I don't anticipate that happening. Let's move on to the Atlanta Falcons, Shefty.
The National Football League, just like it doesn't believe in the New Orleans Saints, does believe in the Atlanta Falcons. And I think it believes in the Falcons not only because of what they've done, but because of the rest of the division. If we look at the Falcons, in the 3 seasons from 2020 to 2023, or from 2021 to 2023, they had 2 primetime games. 2. You know how many primetime games the Falcons have this year? 5, Ty. 5. The National Football League is saying, bring on Michael Penix and what he could do. And if you remember the primetime game that they played last year to end the season against the Washington Commanders right near the end, where they had the poor clock management and Washington won, Penix to Drake London, Penix to Darnell Mooney, Penix to Bijan Robinson. It was fun to watch. The league is in for more. 5 primetime games for the Atlanta Falcons this season, who opened the season at home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 1.
And that's what this division needs, because like we mentioned, I don't think, Carolina's probably going to be better. I don't think they're going to, I don't think we're going to be talking about them winning the division. We obviously know New Orleans. We need Tampa Bay and Atlanta to kind of be going at it all year. I think that's just good for the NFL as a whole. And like you said, I think we saw enough out of Michael Penix last year where people are enthused and they think he can get the job done. So I'm excited to watch the Falcons this year. All right, let's move on to the NFC West, the last division here, and the Arizona Cardinals.
Well, you know what stands out here? Big year for Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray gets to do something that he hasn't had a chance to do in his NFL career. November 3rd, the Arizona Cardinals play in Dallas. Again, another Cowboy matchup. But Kyler Murray went to Allen High School in Dallas. So he gets to go home and play in front of his home fans, home crowd in Dallas. That's going to be a big, meaningful game for him. And I also think Arizona has the chance to start quick because they open the season at New Orleans against who knows what quarterback. Very winnable game on the road. They come home for their home opener against Carolina. Also, winnable game. At San Francisco in week 3, a team they play tough. And I know the 49ers, we'll get to them in a moment, are being talked about a lot, but I think the 49ers are not going to be exactly what people think this year. We'll touch on that in a moment. A winnable game at San Francisco. Home for Seattle, home for Tennessee. I'm just telling you, Arizona, its schedule sets up for the Cardinals to have a fast start.
I agree. And the one game I'm looking at just based on last year, week 7 against the Packers. Last year, they had to go to Lambeau. Weather was not great. They had a great start, and they looked bad. They got outclassed, and that was kind of the start of, them kind of going into the tank a little bit. They get the Packers at home this year, avoid potential bad weather. I agree. I think they could start fast. And I'm pretty high on the Cardinals this year. I feel like we do this a lot, but I think this might be the year where they could finally, break through. They got a couple big free agent acquisitions, and I think Gannon and company have just gotten a little bit better every single year. So I'm excited to see what the Cardinals do this year. Let's move on to the Seattle Seahawks.
I think this is about Cooper Kupp. Seahawks wide receiver Cooper Kupp gets the Rams in week 11 and week 16. 2 matchups against his former team for Cooper Kupp. And right away, the Seahawks have a big matchup in week 1, home for the 49ers, a big NFC West matchup before making the cross-country trip to Pittsburgh and then coming back home for New Orleans. So, again, I think there's a chance there for the Seahawks to have a decent start, but I think when they have Cooper Kupp playing the Rams twice, that's going to be a matchup that a lot of people look forward to seeing.
Yep. And then obviously week 13, they have the Vikings coming to Lumen Field. So Sam Darnold, getting I don't know if there'd be, you'd say payback or revenge or whatever. They decided not to, re-sign him, but he revitalized his career in Minnesota. So, we'll see how that situation plays out.
So I said Cooper Kupp, you say Sam Darnold, a lot on the line for a lot of the new Seahawks and the new look Seahawks offense.
Without a doubt. All right, Schefty, you just mentioned them there. I think a lot of people don't really know what to think of the San Francisco 49ers right now, but what do you think about their schedule?
Well, here's the thing. They play the AFC South, the NFC South, a last place schedule. They have strength of schedule-wise or week of schedule-wise, maybe the most favorable schedule in the National Football League. It is set up for the 49ers to win. The league believes in the 49ers. They've scheduled them on prime time 5 times, even after a 6-11 season. So the National Football League is saying the 49ers are going to be back after a 6-11 season. And they might be, Ty. But I'm just going to warn you, this is a team that has got a lot of holes right now. And we'll see how this all shakes out. But they got some holes to address, some needs to fill. And I don't know that this is going to be a 49ers team quite as good as teams we've seen in recent years. They've lost a lot of talent, but the league believes in them. The schedule is favorable, and we'll see how it shakes out.
And it's kind of the inverse of everything. We used to, we knew that like the offense would, that was kind of the question. We knew the defense was going to be unbelievable. Now, granted, they got Robert Saleh back, but like you said, they've lost a lot of people on defense. I don't think it strikes fear in the heart of people the way it used to when you have to line up against that San Francisco 49er defense. So we'll see. Obviously, they were killed by the injury bug last year. So if they can stay healthy, you would assume that they'd have a much better season. All right, Schefty, let's finish it off here. Last team in the NFC West, the Los Angeles Rams.
How about this one? Rams at Falcons. Week 17. This could be the last year of Matthew Stafford's career in LA. The Rams have 2 number ones. We'll see how that plays out. It would be a great way for Matthew Stafford to finish up because 17 years into his NFL career, this will be the first time that Matthew Stafford has played in front of fans in Atlanta since the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl in
Wow.
2006, 19 years ago, almost to the day. He played college football at Georgia, 17th season in the NFC, but has only played on the Falcons turf in the 2006 Peach Bowl and in the 2020 COVID year with no fans. Every other game of his versus the Falcons has been international, where they were the home team. 17 years in the NFL, same conference, only played in Atlanta one time in front of no fans. So this year, Matthew Stafford, what could be his final game, gets to go home. We're looking at that on the Rams schedule early on.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a really cool nugget. And then the only other thing I'm looking at, week 3, the NFC Championship rematch. Obviously, they're not going to have to deal with 4 inches of snow on the ground like they had to in the NFC Championship. So I think that'll be a good early season tilt from 2 of the best teams from last season who look to be pretty solid this year as well.
Ty, look at the schedule again. I just want to point out, we mentioned how the NFL is doing what it can to break up families. Thanksgiving, Lions, Packers, Cowboys, Chiefs, Ravens, Bengals. Christmas, a triple header, Cowboys, Commanders, Lions, Vikings, and Broncos, Chiefs. Honestly, just great holiday games. 7 international games in what is a increasing trend in the National Football League. I think we're going towards more and more international games. I think the league is working towards that 18-game season to where they could siphon off a 16-game international package that they go sell to Netflix for $2+ billion a year. More money for the league. We see where that's going. So they're getting ready with all these international games this year. Again, a lot of great holiday games, a lot of intriguing international matchups. There is your 2025 NFL schedule with insights and intel on all of those teams. Hey, Ty, great job today. Appreciate it.
Hey, you as well. Thank you.
And great job by our producer, Dan Stanzik. Thank you for tuning in to another Adam Schefter Podcast, the 2025 NFL schedule release podcast. We'll be back in this spot again after the league meetings in Minneapolis, where they discuss and vote on the tush push. Sneak preview, won't be surprised if the tush push isn't around, but the Philadelphia Eagles are going to put up a big time fight to keep that, and we'll be back on this podcast to break it all down. Until then, everybody, have a great week, be well, and stay safe.